Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We actually had quite a few people who registered for the live, or RSVP for the live, so we'll hang on just a bit and get started in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, hopefully you guys have seen my most recent videos. I did drop the very first video for this series talking about what is the life science industry, just kind of providing an overview. Like I said, this course, we're going to be starting from the absolute basics. So if you are kind of beyond the basics and know a little bit more than, you know, just like what biotech is, and you have those definitions and understand that already, then, you know, just give other people grace, because some people may not know what those things are. And this overview is meant to provide exposure to people who may just be getting exposed to the biotech industry or to life sciences as a whole for the first time. I have people ask me all the time, or people will just say like, oh, yeah, like I wish I could work in biotech because I know it's an industry that pays well and it's very lucrative, but I work in marketing, or my background is in PR. Not realizing that there are roles for PR, for HR. There are people with education backgrounds who come in and do a lot of the onboarding course development for large pharmaceutical companies, and their backgrounds are in education. There are a lot of NPs and PAs and nurses who have a lot of clinical education experience, and there are roles for that. So really, sometimes all people need is the exposure to something to discover that it exists and find their place and realize that there may be an opportunity for them in something non-traditional. But sometimes it just takes that exposure for them finding out about it. So that's what I'm hoping to do with this course. It's not meant to be an in-depth, you know, where we're going super deep and I'm explaining pharmacology and some more advanced concepts to you guys, which that is something that I can do since my background is as a pharmacist. But that is not the purpose of this course. It is to provide the everyday person, people who have backgrounds, or maybe they're in roles that are non-STEM focused, or maybe they are people with degrees in the life sciences or a STEM degree and are looking to do something a little bit different, but aren't exactly sure where to get started. That is exactly who this is designed for. I know there are also a lot of people who may have heard of biotech, heard of clinical research, heard of pharma, maybe found out about a couple of titles that they feel like might be a good fit, have applied for those positions, and may not have made any progress with the job interview process. And so maybe they're looking for some support and trying to figure out, okay, what am I doing wrong? What can I do better? How can I improve my candidacy as I'm applying to these positions? So that is exactly what this is designed for, to help people learn a little bit more, get a foundation, and just have somewhere to start as they are starting to apply to positions, and get some direction basically to help them develop a strategy for their next steps. Do you perform clinical investigation for medical devices too? I'm not sure what you mean by that question. Are you asking if I personally have experience in that area with clinical investigations for medical devices? If that's what you're asking, then I have support. Like I have worked in the device space as well. Okay. Yeah, I have experience in that area. I wasn't sure if you were asking that, or if you were asking like are clinical studies required for medical devices too, but the answer would be yes to either one of those. But yeah, currently I do not work in the medical device space. So I had device experience when I first got started in biotech and in regulatory affairs, but I do not currently support medical device studies in the work that I do. I think I'll also have my my TA, who is, I think I saw her join the live just a few minutes ago. She'll be helping me kind of moderate some of the comments and just make sure everybody's questions gets answered. But yeah, I think we have a good number of people to kind of go ahead and get started. So of course, if you have questions, feel free to ask throughout. I'll do my best to answer them. We also have a few kind of directed questions and kind of some guided activities that we're going to be doing this evening related to the video that I posted and the material that we've already covered. If you've been on one of my previous lives related to this course, which is Intro to Biotech, Pharma, and Clinical Research, then you know, or if you've already downloaded the course syllabus, which is in my bio if you have not already done that. So anybody that wants to know, like, how do you get involved in this course? How do you enroll? Just go to the link in my bio and you can download the course syllabus. It'll send you a link to the PDF version of the course syllabi, and you can see exactly week by week what we're going to be covering, what you can look forward to learning, and it also has the assignments that I'll have you guys working on, and these are going to be self-guided assignments, excuse me. But yeah, so if you've been on the previous live or if you've already taken a look at the syllabus, I'm sorry if this is like providing a glare, this necklace that I have on. I'm gonna just tuck it in because I know that might be a little distracting. What about genetic testing? Can you elaborate on what the ask is there, or what your question is? But yeah, sort of back to what I was saying about if you have been on any of the lives previously, I've done 2 lives so far about this course, or if you have downloaded the course syllabi, then you know the very first assignment for you guys was to, if you have not already, to complete your GCP or Good Clinical Practice certification. So that's something that we discussed last week. Has anybody already taken the liberty of doing that? It'd be great to have an idea of how many people actually had some time to do it this week. I think the date that I put in the syllabus was that the target date for completing that GCP certification would be the 7th, which is this upcoming Friday, so February the 7th. And that's going to be helpful because the very next lecture or video that I'll drop will be on going through each one of the life science industries. And there are many more, there's way more life science industries besides pharma, clinical research, and biotech. I'm not going to be going into detail on medical devices and like some of those other things. Those will be the big 3 that I'm focusing on. But I'll be going into more depth on each one of those and like what some of the similarities and differences are. So with that being said, yeah, if you guys complete the GCP certification, which is free, by the way, it's going to be beneficial to you all. You'll be able to add that certification to your resume. And it'll help to kind of give you some context on the material that I'll cover. Of course, like I said, I'll be still breaking it down as if you don't have any prior knowledge of it. But if you have not done it, now would be a good time to do it so you understand a little bit more, like have some context on some of the acronyms and concepts that I'll be going over in the rest of the course. Let me see here. Shy, I think she's up here. Shy, can you drop a comment with the instructions for like how to obtain the course syllabus? And I'll just pin that comment. Shy is my course. She's my TA for this course. And she'll also be joining me on live in a little bit to answer some questions for you guys from the perspective of a clinical research associate and as someone who works in clinical research. So I'm going to have her drop that in there because I know people always, as they're joining the live, they continue to ask like, okay, how do you get the syllabus or how do you enroll? And the link is in my bio to download the syllabus for free so you can have access to all the dates and what you can expect for this course and when everything will be posted. And the syllabus will also provide the assignments that I'll have you guys doing. And like I said, these assignments are for your benefit and for your benefit alone. So if you choose not to do them, that's fine. But if you do decide to do them and get on these lives and interact with one another, it's only going to add more value to you because I'll be answering questions and having some kind of guided discussions and pop quizzes on these lives based on the information that is in those assignments. So, like I said, this course kind of came highly requested by like a lot of my past clients, some of my like people that I'm currently kind of working with to help land new roles. A lot of the students that I've talked to encourage me to do this Hillman Talk course. And I personally thought it would be very beneficial as well. I just pinned that comment from Shy. So she said that the syllabus is located in my bio on my page. So if you're looking for the syllabus, that's where you can find it. Okay. But I did kind of have a little bit of, the link is in my bio to sign up for the course, to enroll, to download the syllabus. Okay. And hold on one second for me. What I'm actually about to do is I have a couple of pop quiz questions for people that have been following along with the course so far. And I'm going to just ask some questions and you guys can answer in the comments. Oh, I was wondering why I could not find the questions in my Google Drive. It's because I'm logged into my wrong email account. Let's see here. Okay, so yeah, let's just go ahead and jump right into things. Okay, thank you, Shy. All the like frequently asked questions, Shy is going to be answering some of those in the comments, and I'll also pin some of those comments as well. So transitioning into clinical research, if you're someone who wants like more guided support, you can join the Discord chat, and you should be able to do that. Let me see if we can get Shy up here real quick. I think she requested to join the live. Okay, here we go.
There we go.
Perfect. Hey, Shy.
Hi.
You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Okay, this looks much better than the last time.
You got to figure this thing out.
We got to do like a little practice session or something. Okay, so now we got Shy up here. We're going to go ahead and get started with some of these pop quiz questions. It's okay if you don't know the answer to these, like just answer to the best of your ability. I'm going to be asking the questions. I don't have a way to I didn't set up a poll prior to the live, so I'm just going to ask the questions and you guys can kind of drop the answers based on like A, B, C, D answer choices that I'm going to read out. And we'll go over the answers to these as well. And these all came from the GCP certification course that I suggested that you guys do as the first assignment. So if you don't know the answers to these questions, once you complete the GCP certification, you will know the answers to these questions as well. Okay, so for anybody that's done it or anybody wants to take a stab, the first question is, what is the primary purpose of GCP? So like, what is the purpose of good clinical practice? Why does it exist? So the answer choices, like the options are going to be A, to ensure a clinical trial is completed quickly. B, to protect the rights, safety, and well-being of trial participants. C, to help sponsors save money. Or D, to allow investigators to conduct trials as they see fit. And I'll ask the question all over again and let you guys answer. But let's go through it one more time. What is the purpose of good clinical practice? Like, why do we have GCP? Why does it exist? A, to ensure a clinical trial is completed quickly, like to basically make sure that the trial is conducted as quickly as possible. B, to protect the rights, safety, and well-being of trial participants. C, to help sponsors save money. So that's like the drug companies, like to help them save money. And then D, to allow investigators to conduct trials as they see fit. So what do you guys think? What's the primary purpose of GCP?
Yeah, A or
And then
B.
we got A, we got a few B's in here, and that's all I see. Okay, so that's not that everybody did pretty good. So the answer to that first question, excuse me, the answer to that first question is actually B. So anybody who answered B, you got it correct. The purpose of good clinical practice is to basically ensure that the right, safety, and well-being of trial participants is protected. Because ultimately, you want to make sure that they are safe. You want to make sure that they are given quality care throughout the course of them taking or being administered an investigational product, which means they're typically receiving a drug that is not yet approved. So there are a lot of risks associated with that. We want to keep those patients safe, and we want to protect their rights. Since they're participating in these studies voluntarily, we want to make sure that it's continuously communicated to them that they have the right to withdraw from the study at any point, that they have the right to walk away, that they have rights as participants as part of the study. So those are the main purposes of GCP, and the GCP training, to make sure that anyone who is affiliated with a clinical trial or involved in clinical research is trained on these things to make sure that patients are safe. Shai, you want to talk about this from a CRA perspective, just like
Yeah, I
GCP?
sure can. So, really, I mean, you summed it up perfectly, but GCP was really just created to protect patients. So, I don't know if you guys are familiar or have heard of the Tuskegee experiment, and that was where trials were done on Black people. And the purpose of the study was intentionally not disclosed. So the participants were thinking they were doing the study for one thing, and the entire time they were really trying to see the effects of syphilis going untreated for a long time in Black people. And experiments like that, and there are several others throughout history, which uh, were the reason why they founded PCP. So all participants in clinical research are fully protected. Their rights are number one, they have the ability to withdraw at any time, so you can withdraw consent at any time. And it's really just to safeguard the patient.
Yep. So that pretty much sums it up, and kind of provides that overview. So hopefully that makes sense to anybody who selected anything besides B. And yeah, yes. So what Shai was just kind of explaining was like one of the many reasons that GCP kind of came into place. There are a lot. I mean, honestly, there were a lot of different things that happened in history. Like when you think about the reason why any rules or regulations exist, it usually came out of need because something went wrong. Something happened where they realized, hey, we probably should not let this happen again, and we should probably make a rule. Like even things as simple as like stop signs on the road. They usually come up because somebody got in an accident at that intersection and they said, okay, to make sure this doesn't happen again, nobody else gets fatally injured or, dies as a result of this stop sign or the safety measure not being here, we're going to put a stop sign at the intersection.
Developed from that specific situation. However, that was one of many that influenced the need for having DC.
Exactly. Thank you, Shai. Okay, so now we'll move on to question number 2 of our pop quiz. And just so you know, I only have 5 questions, so it's not a long exam. This is just for you guys to just kind of have some context and for us to get some discussion going. So question number 2 is, who is responsible for obtaining informed consent from trial participants? I'll say it again. Who is responsible for obtaining informed consent from trial participants? So again, we're kind of going to go through the ABCD answers, and you guys can just drop what you think is the best answer. Or if you've done the GCP certification already, then you should be able to select the right answer based on that. So A, the study sponsor, B, the investigator or designated study team member, C, the ethics committee, or sometimes they call it the IRB, the Investigation Review Board, and D, the FDA. So who do you think is responsible for obtaining informed consent for clinical trial participants? A, study sponsor, so that's like the pharmaceutical company. B, the study investigator or designated study team member. C, the ethics committee. Or D, the FDA. We'll kind of go through that same process. I'll give you guys some time to respond, and then we'll go over the answer and the rationale behind it. So I see some B's. I see C as an answer choice. I see one person responded D. So some of the answers are all over the place. So I'm gonna give y'all like 10 more seconds if you want to drop an answer here. Okay. So let's run back through the question one more time. Who is responsible for obtaining informed consent from trial participants? Who is the person who is responsible for getting getting the consent from the patients? So A was study sponsor, B was investigator or study team member, C is the ethics committee, and D was FDA. So the answer here is going to be B, which is the investigator or the designated study team member. And the reason why B is the answer and not any of the others is that GCP requires informed consent be obtained from every participant before a clinical trial, and it has to be conducted by an investigator or a qualified team member that is responsible or involved in that study to ensure that participants fully understand the study, its risk, and their rights. So basically, FDA, like when a study is granted an IND, like when an IND is approved by FDA to move forward with a study, FDA is basically granting the ability of the clinical trial team to have oversight for that study, which means that FDA, for example, they're not going to know the ins and outs and the day-to-day things that are going on with that study for them to obtain that informed consent from the patients. The people who are on the ground working there directly with the site, directly with the patients, are going to be the eyes on the ground who are going to have that interaction with the participants. The reason it's not going to be the ethics board is because kind of the same way that FDA is this national health authority for us, like from a country perspective for the United States. The IRB or the ethics committee kind of serves in that same capacity that FDA has for the institution, or for, sometimes there are like ethics committees or IRBs that are for multiple sites, but they kind of act in that same manner as FDA on behalf of the site. And so again, if there are multiple sites or if there are multiple studies going on at one institution, they're not going to be able to know the ins and outs of every single detail that's going on. And so the study team members and the investigator are going to be the ones who have that direct oversight to be able to tell a patient, here's a little bit about this investigational drug that we're going to administer to you. This is why we're studying it. Here's here's the data that we've studied so far, and here's how it performed in animals. So here's how we expect for it to perform in you as someone who has this condition that we're trying to look into further. And as a result of that, this is what you'll receive. This is the care that you'll receive. Here's how often or how frequently we're going to monitor you. And here's how much you're going to be compensated for this study. And also kind of letting them know that, if at any point you decide that you don't want to be a part of this study anymore, you have the right to withdraw yourself from the study and choose not to participate any further. So the study team and the investigator are going to be the people that have that authority. Sai, anything from you?
Yeah, so just to reiterate, a lot of people will have their hands in clinical research in the clinical trials, but the site and the investigator are the only one that are going to have direct patient interaction. So everybody else is kind of behind the scenes. So the CRA will not interact with the patient. The sponsor who's funding the trial will not interact, nor will the FDA.
Right. Okay, perfect. So I hope that kind of clarifies. I know someone had said, like, are you saying obtaining, obtaining, or collecting? Because it could, kind of that interpretation may change their response. And so when you're kind of thinking about those questions, you want to think about, okay, who's going to be obtaining the informed consent. So the people who are directly going to be talking to them, basically explaining the trial to them, and then getting their signature on that dotted line to say, yes, I agree to participate in this study. Okay, so any questions, like anything to clarify on those first two questions before we keep on going? Like I said, this is meant to be interactive. If you have any questions, or if like that explanation didn't make any sense, feel free to like ask more questions and we can kind of give some more examples if that would be helpful. Yeah, but basically kind of gonna go through the rest of these questions. Like I said, there's 5 in total, and just kind of talk about from a clinical research perspective, from a biotech perspective, like why it's important to have that GCP certification. Just kind of re-emphasizing, why it's going to be of benefit to you to do that free certification, because it is very important. And it's something that you have to do anyways once you start your very first role in clinical research, if that's what you're going after. Okay, so question number 3 is, which document outlines the protocol and the objectives of a clinical trial? I'm going to read it again. Which document outlines the protocol and objectives of a clinical trial? A, investigator's brochure. B, study protocol. C, informed consent form. Or D, case report form. So we're asking what document is going to provide the overview and objectives of a clinical trial. Which document is going to outline the protocol and talk about those objectives and go into detail. So A, investigator brochure. B, study protocol. C, informed consent form. Or D, case report form. And again, this is not one of those things where you have to be afraid to get the answer wrong. It's not for a grade or anything. This is just class participation, so that people kind of get some exposure to some clinical research, real life situations and questions. But also just so you can see how important that, or how beneficial that GCP certification would be, like if you're someone who has not completed it yet, because these questions are coming directly from the content that you will learn about in the GCP certification, which is great. Okay, so what document outlines the protocol and objectives of a clinical trial? A, investigator brochure. B, study protocol. C, informed consent form. D, case report form. So far, it looks like we have mainly B as our response, and B is the correct answer. So that, like, the word protocol was kind of part of the question, so it kind of gave it away there, but the answer is study protocol. That is the document that outlines the protocol and the objectives of a trial. So to kind of give you some context on what a study protocol is, it is a document that outlines the objectives, the overall study design, the methodology, some of the statistical considerations of a trial. So basically how the data will be analyzed, like what the plan is for the data to be analyzed after the trial is over. And it basically serves as a roadmap for investigators to follow to make sure that they are consistent with the way that they're collecting data and that they are compliant with GCP, because ultimately all this data, when the FDA or whatever health authority is going to is reviewing it, they are looking to make sure that this study could be replicated under the same circumstances. Kind of the same thing of like when you were in lab, like if you were in high school or in college and they talked about that methodology, like the scientific method. The reason that we go through all those steps of the scientific method to conduct a study is because you want to be able to give somebody the instructions of everything that you did in that study. And so basically, if you handed off that information and gave that study protocol and all that data to someone else, they should be able to, in theory, conduct that same study and get similar results based on the study methodologies that you guys did for the study. If they're not able to replicate that and get similar, and not necessarily similar results, because of course, like that demographic may change depending on like how you're recruiting for the study and things like that. But if it can't be replicated, or if it can't be redone, or if there are a lot of inconsistencies within the data, that usually is an indicator that the trial was not conducted. Um, Things may not have been documented accurately. There may be missing data. There may be gaps in what was collected, or kind of gaps in the story that we are using to kind of develop our key points that we want to put in the package that we submit to FDA ultimately. So the study protocol is very important, and it pretty much guides how the trial is going to be conducted. So that's something that anybody that's involved in clinical research or biotech relies on very heavily. And regardless of what functional area you're in, you'll notice that a lot of people, like everybody within a company, typically knows the study protocol very well because they are referring to it on a day-to-day basis. Sorry?
Yeah, so in clinical research, we often refer to the study protocol as like our Bible, because you spend so much time in there, and I don't care how long you've been on a study, if you're a doctor or you're not, you will refer to that protocol. Um, and it's kind of just like it's basically the law, um, and you go by it. And any deviation from that can lead to, other mistakes happening in the trial. So it's really there for patient safety, and all of that. But I mean, it's every single detail is in the protocol, including exclusion, inclusion materials, schedule of events, exactly what blood draws, X-rays, etc. they will need at each clinical visit. So it literally has everything in there. So the protocol is probably the most important document in clinical trial.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, protocol is definitely going to be one of the most referred to documents. I mean, even things like when you're conducting a study that is going to be in multiple countries, that protocol has to be translated in different languages before it can go before a IRB or ethics committee in a different country for them to approve. So when FDA approves it, for us to be able, if it's a US based company and we say, okay, we're going to conduct this study, but we also want to conduct it in Israel and Italy and China and Japan, we can get that approval from FDA to say, okay, our IND, we got our study may proceed letter from FDA, and so we can now proceed with conducting the study in the U.S. We still have to go through that process of translating the protocol in all the different languages for every single company or for every single country that has a health authority that we would need to submit to. And again, that study protocol is being translated not just for the purpose of those IRBs, but also for those study teams in those other countries who may not their language may not be English, for them to be able to refer to it throughout the course of the study. So it's like super important, that study protocol, that everyone is familiar with it, regardless of what country they're in, regardless of whether they're a CRA, whether they're a clinical trial associate, whether they're regulatory, even our PV team. Like, you can ask somebody about monitoring on the study, and most people can recall it very quickly because of how frequently people are looking at the study protocol. Okay, so very good. I think everybody got that question correct. Okay, so down to our last two questions. So our fourth question is, what role does an institutional review board, or IRB, or ethics committee play in a clinical trial? So remember a little bit earlier, I was saying there was a question that mentioned ethics committee, and I also referred to it as the IRB, because sometimes they're interchangeable. They're usually called different things. Sometimes they'll refer to it as the ethics committee in some countries. In the US, we typically refer to it as the IRB, is what most institutions call their review board that kind of oversees studies at the institution level. So the question is, what does an IRB or ethics committee play in a clinical trial? So the answers are: A, provides funding for the study. They provide the money for the study to be completed. B, they conduct the study's statistical analysis. So after the study is completed, they're the ones who analyze the data. C, they review and approve the trial to protect participants' rights and welfare. Or D, they act as a liaison between the sponsor and regulatory agency. So what is the purpose of the IRB? What is the ethics committee or IRB doing within the context of the study, is what we want to know. I'll go back to these questions one more time. A, provides funding for the study. B, conducts the study's statistical analyses. C, reviews and approves the trial to protect participants' rights and welfare. Or D, acts as a liaison between sponsors and regulatory agencies. I'll give you guys just a few more seconds to respond, and then we'll go through this one as well. Okay, so it looks like most people responded C, and C is the correct answer. So if you answer C, that was correct. So the reason that they do this is because the IRB or ethics committee is responsible for reviewing and approving study protocols, informed consent, and any other materials basically related to the trial. Anything that involves participants, anything that involves the people who are a part of the study, any patient-facing materials essentially are going to be reviewed by the IRB. And that can even be things down to if there is a patient diary, for example, like if patients are going to be taking notes on their experience while they are being administered the study drug, if they are going to receive some type of patient brochure or like some type of instructional material that tells them how to take the medication if maybe they're not taking it in a controlled setting, like where a nurse is administering it to them. Maybe if, for the investigational product, if it's a tablet that they're taking 3 times a day, they'll come in and they'll be given that investigational product. They'll take it home and they'll have some type of like dosing card that will tell them how to take the medication, if they can take it with food, how it needs, how soon it needs to be taken from the different doses and things like that. That would even need to be approved by the IRB or ethics committee as well.
I'm saying they even review advertising materials like that, even goes through the IRB as well.
Yep, even advertising materials. That is another good point. So pretty much their overall goal is to protect the rights, safety, and well-being of participants while ensuring that the study is ethically and scientifically sound. So if anything sounds amiss, like if there is anything that just maybe doesn't sound quite right, they're going to ask questions. They're going to clarify. They may require you to go back and modify your study protocol or the materials to make sure that it's compliant and make sure that it is going to ensure that the study is conducted in a safe manner for patients. Okay, so really good. Looks like everybody got that one right. Okay, so now we're down to our last question. This is going to be our last question that has like kind of answers, like A, B, C, D choices. And then I do kind of have a little situational question. This one may be like a little bit more detailed. And this is something that may not necessarily, they might not have provided like case studies inside the GCP certification training. But since we have Shai up here who kind of walked through this from the perspective of the CRA, it would be a great kind of learning, thinking, thought process exercise if you're someone who is considering clinical research or a CRA role, clinical research coordinator role. It'll help you guys out tremendously. Okay, so last question with responses like ABCD is going to be, what does an investigator have to do if a serious adverse event or SAE occurs during a clinical trial? So if a patient has a serious side effect as a result of the investigational product that they've been administered during the clinical trial, what is the investigator's responsibility? So A is report it to the study sponsor immediately and follow regulatory requirements. B is only document it if the patient requests it. C is wait until the study is complete and then report. And D is ignore it unless it affects multiple participants. So what would be the process? Like if a patient has a severe adverse reaction or a SAE, a severe adverse event during the clinical trial, what are they required to do? A, report it to the study sponsor immediately and follow regulatory requirements. B, only document if the patient requests. C, wait until the study is complete before reporting. Or D, ignore it unless another patient or multiple patients experience that side effect. And we'll do the same thing. I'll give you guys some time to respond if anybody wants to take a stab at it. You guys are doing really good, by the way. I think Shai said that earlier, but yeah, the responses. It sounds like you guys have really been, locked in with this with the GCP course, and that's good. I heard some people, or not heard, but like I saw some people responded earlier and said that they had gotten started on it, didn't complete it yet. But even if you've only made it part of the way through, I think you should still be able to answer a lot of these questions. And some of them, if you worked in healthcare, like even if you haven't worked in clinical research, some of this stuff you should be able to answer correctly also. Okay, so looks like everybody answered A, which is correct. So an investigator is required to report an adverse event, especially if it's a severe or serious adverse event, to the sponsor immediately, and they have to follow the regulatory process for that. So severe adverse events, they have to be reported to the sponsor as soon as possible. Usually this is within 24 hours. So within one full day of the SAE, it has to be reported to the sponsor, and it has to be documented according to regulatory guidelines. So the investigator, once they are made aware of this, they may be required to report the event to the IRB and the ethics committee, as well as regulatory authorities. In the US, there are certain stipulations and requirements for how quickly a SAE has to be reported, depending on what type of SAE it is. So serious can be, as serious as death, like somebody dies as a result of a, being a part of the study, or it can be something like they are hospitalized, for example, but not resulting in death. So depending on the severity and the impact to the patient, it can be required to be submitted to FDA.
Right. And I just want to say a SAE also doesn't necessarily mean it's related to the study medication. It's just something that's happened and then it needs to be investigated so they can determine if it's related to the drug or not.
That's that CRA right there. That's that CRA coming out because we're going to make sure.
And be in the hospital and that's, sure. But that ain't our fault, but, we got to document it, so.
I've seen stuff like with me being regulatory, I work very closely with the safety or the pharmacovigilance team to submit a lot of these SAEs when they happen. So I've seen things like, after the study is over, we usually go through and audit the data and, take a look to see, okay, out of the SAEs, which of them were actually related to the study drug. And typically, especially with like late phase studies like phase 3, it's usually very low incidences of severe adverse reactions being related to the study drug. I've gone through and kind of seen, I remember one time I was just like going through and like doing a little like internal audit, and I saw where it was it was listed as a severe adverse event, but when I looked at the reason, it was gunshot wound. And so obviously that was not related to the study drug. So it's like one of those things where, okay, yeah, you can have a severe adverse reaction, but like it can literally be somebody getting pneumonia while they're taking a medication for cholesterol during the study. So those two things do not necessarily have to be linked. So that's like a really important point. Thank you, Shah, for mentioning that. I don't want people thinking like, yeah. I was on this live where they were talking about clinical research and
it's not even the study drug why a SAE is reported.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's always life happening. Just life on life everywhere.
It could literally be anything. Okay, so now we're going to kind of walk through that situational or that scenario based question, and kind of, it'd be great if you guys, like, if you are someone who's willing to drop a comment in here and tell what your thought process would be. You don't have to type a whole paragraph or a whole story or anything like that, but it would be nice to kind of see, okay, are you someone who can think like a CRA? This is basically what this activity is designed to do. So I'm going to give you guys a scenario, and you can just type your responses and put them in the chat and let me know, okay, what is your thought process? How would you handle this situation? And then we'll let Shai kind of tell you what the proper steps would be as a CRA to go through something like this. So
I'm gonna lie, this question is actually an interview question. I've got this on a few interviews.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, so anybody that's interested in clinical research coordinators, CRA, buckle up. Okay, so here's the scenario. Imagine that you are a CRA, so clinical research associate, monitoring a clinical trial site. During a routine visit or routine review, you notice that one participant's informed consent form is missing a signature. The participant has now been enrolled in the study for 2 months and has already undergone multiple study procedures. What should you do? And so here I kind of want to just know, like, what is you guys' thought process? How would you handle a situation like this? And you can just kind of give me step by step, or you can kind of summarize what your thought process would be. But yeah, if you were a CRA, how would you handle that situation? And you'd be surprised how often things like this actually do happen in clinical research. Like I said, I have not worked as a CRA before, but even with regulatory, like with working with our CROs, who are responsible, at the country level, for obtaining signatures and getting the regulatory documentation, and then they submit it to us. And then I, in regulatory, am required to kind of go through those documents and make sure they are all completed the right way before we submit them to FDA. And I've seen where, sometimes a form would be outdated. It may be like a outdated version of FDA's form, and they got all the investigators to sign that form, and there were 197 investigators, and that form is not any good. So we have to get them signed all over again. And so, yeah, you'd be surprised how frequently this comes up.
160 something patients on the wrong informed consent. I've literally had that happen at a site not that long ago.
I mean, because like a lot of time, another thing that's really important is that document versioning happens all the time, to where, we may be working, completing this or conducting the study under one version of the protocol. But if something happens and we, decide, okay, maybe we want to monitor more frequently, or maybe we want to reorder the endpoints, for example, there may be a new amendment to the protocol, or even changes or an updated version of the informed consent. So if patients are not signing the correct version, that is a compliance issue. It's a regulatory compliance issue ultimately. And so we have to figure out a way to handle it. Somebody asked, could we read the question again? So I'm going to do that really quick. So the scenario is, you are a CRA, a clinical research associate, monitoring a clinical trial site. During a routine review, you notice that one participant's informed consent form is missing a signature. The participant has already been enrolled in the study for 2 months and has undergone multiple study procedures. What should you, as the CRA, do?
Human error happens all the time, so you will find a lot of issues all the time. We're human, you can't help it. But just being in clinical research, like I tell anybody that will listen, it's not hard work. It can be sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. But it's really tedious. You have to really pay attention to detail. Like, that's not a game. You could be, somebody's life could be at risk by you overdoing things. Or the study could be at risk. So it's really just paying attention to detail, doing thorough reviews, not skipping steps. Some people will, try to finesse, just to finish up their work quickly. But if you truly care about helping clinical research advance, you will do your part. And your part being thorough, being the best that you can, making sure you pay attention, because every detail matters. So
yeah. And when it comes down to it, like, I mean, it's so many different things at play, of like why it matters. I mean, obviously, the most important thing to us, especially working directly with patients, like if you are someone on the study team who is patient facing, or you're, 1 degree away from being patient facing, like your primary goal is to ensure patient safety as your first and foremost goal. The second thing is to ensure compliance, because ultimately none of this data, none of anything that's happening in the context of this study is going to matter if things weren't documented. Because like people always say, if it wasn't documented, then it didn't happen. And so if things weren't documented, then all this data could be null and void when it comes time for FDA or whatever health authority to review and make a determination on if the product's going to be approved. If there's not enough data, if there is missing data, if there's holes in the story of, what you're trying to convey, like whether the product works or not, or like whether it's effective, whether, it has superiority over the current therapeutic, the current standard of care, it's not going to work if things weren't done. So like every single detail matters, like I was saying. Okay, so I'm gonna read out some of the responses that we had, and then we'll go through the answer here. Okay, So Teague said, tell my boss, ask if the participant still wants to continue, ask them to sign the form and then report it. Which I think, that was a great job of kind of going through those steps and like addressing multiple things. So good job with that. Autumn's response was escalated, re-review the consent with the participant, get the consent signed, and maybe exclude the participant. Tiffany said, get the participant to sign again. Okay, and I think that's all the responses that we had. So I know that was a super loaded question. So honestly, I really did not expect anybody that has not worked in clinical research to get every single possible step that you could have correct. But if you're someone who's interested in a clinical research role, then make sure you're taking notes and like writing this stuff down in case you get asked this in an interview. And make sure you come back and tell Sha, like, girl, yeah, this helped me.
Great, y'all did so good.
No, that was really good. Okay, so here is like a typical process of like what you would do if something like this was realized. So number one is going to be to identify the issue. So the participant's informed consent form is incomplete because it lacks a required signature. If that's a required component, you usually have some type of checklist that you're looking for when you're looking over those informed consent documents. And, let's say there's like 15 different fields that patients have to sign off or initial on, and then you get to the very last one and it's missing, it's still considered incomplete, even if they checked off every other box on the informed consent form. So the first thing is identifying the issue, and that means that you are paying attention to detail to be able to catch that issue. The next thing is going to be investigating the cause. So as a CRA, one of your things that you're tasked with is, kind of finding out why these things are happening, because you're not the one who is going and physically handing people the form and having them sign it. Your clinical research coordinators, like some of your study team, the people that are on the ground are the ones that are responsible for, conducting those interviews with the patients and then ultimately getting them to sign those forms. So you want to know, okay, if we had this as part of the protocol and like the actual procedures for the study, how was this missed? So you're going to investigate the cause, which is usually going to involve speaking with the investigator and the study coordinator to understand how the oversight occurred. And so you really want to figure out, like, okay, with our current workflow, at what point was this missed? And like, how, we want to figure out how we can improve this so that it's not missed again. So was it missed during the initial consent conversation? Was it lost in documentation? Like, did they obtain the signature? And maybe like that last page of the document was lost and we don't have that last page. What process, in that stepwise workflow was missing and how, so you're going to do that investigative work to figure out what's going on. Step number 3 is going to be corrective action. So next, okay, we've identified an issue. We have investigated to see how it happened. Now we want to figure out how we're going to make sure this does not happen again. So you're going to, the corrective action is going to be obviously to get the signature. So to those who address that portion in there by saying, okay, I'm going to make sure that we actually get the patient's signature, that is accurate. So if they're still willing to participate, we want to make sure we obtain that signature from them. But retrospective consent does not validate prior study activities. So now that means that we have to report and document this. So if we said, okay, we did not obtain consent because, the process was to get the signature was missed, so consent was not obtained. And now we have to, we've already conducted 2 or 3 different study procedures on this patient. Like we've drawn blood from them. We've done all these different things. We swabbed their mouth, swabbed their nose, collected samples and things like that. And we're just now getting consent after doing those things. Now we are going to have to report that as a deviation from the study protocol because it was not done in the way that the study protocol has outlined for us to do these things. Which means that we have to, usually there's some type of corrective action, like which we call a CAPA, a corrective and preventative action. So this is usually some type of documentation that is submitted to say, okay, this occurred, we've already addressed it, but here's what we are going to be doing as a company, as an organization, as a team to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. And this is exactly how we're going to ensure that that does not happen again. And so then, so those preventative measures are going to ensure that before anybody else gets enrolled in the study or before anybody else, is going through that informed consent process, that we have cleared that up to make sure that it's been addressed fully. Anything from your side?
Um, yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered everything. Like you said, once it's identified, you as a CRA, your sole role is to get to the bottom of any issues that the sites have. So after speaking with the investigator and the study team, and you figure out what happened, it is like everything is documented. You will come up with a corrective action plan. And also, one thing that we always have to do after every single issue as a CRA on site, we have to retrain, even though we know they know the protocol. It's just still something that we have to do. Okay, I understand that it was an accident, but we still have to retrain you on this specific task, so that way it's not missed again. And it does actually have to be reported as a protocol deviation. Um, Most times, something like the informed consent does not have to go to the IRB. Um, I mean, sometimes it can, but in my experience, most times it doesn't. But the sponsor absolutely gets a list of every single protocol deviation. And you don't want to be on their list for that. Not to let them. After that, it's reported. We go over our corrective action plan. And it's also, we have to write reports after every single visit. It also gets documented in that report. So it's documented, every single issue is documented multiple times in multiple different ways. So it's really, any deviation is a big deal. So we do our best to try to prevent those moving forward with the site. But yeah, I think that covers everything.
Okay.
No, I see this comment. Is it coaching, training the individual who missed it or the whole team? It's the entire site staff. It's everybody. Everybody gets retrained. Because typically you'll have multiple people working. Everybody, I can't say that. Everybody at the site on that particular study. Whether it's multiple study coordinators, the PI, the sub-I, everybody at the site on that study gets retrained.
Yeah, that's a good question.
That was.
Yeah, so you can probably imagine like how, I don't even want to say annoying, but like how annoying it would be to go through that retraining process. And um, honestly, like as someone who works in regulatory and does not work at the site level, there are things that happen at the site level that will even trickle up to regulatory, to where CAPAs have to, like multiple CAPAs, like multiple corrective actions have to be done across multiple teams, across like one incident that seems like it's a small incident, but because it happened at the site level, and then maybe it did not, it happened at the site level and it wasn't anything that impacted regulatory, but then maybe there was an inspection that happened, like, maybe Romania decided to go and visit the site and they caught something because this happened and it hadn't been caught yet. Now it's going to be escalated to regulatory. And so a corrective action may have to be in place for regulatory, to maybe, figure out how we can make sure that this gets avoided before it even reaches the site next time. So sometimes there are multiple corrective actions across different teams. Like sometimes people don't even see like all the things, like all the cascade of effects that it happens, as a result of one small thing being missed within the documentation process, or within, just doing things according to the study protocol.
Like to piggyback off that, when I first started my current job, like 4 months in, my brand new site that I just got, they had an audit. And of course, I'm taking this over from another CRA, so I'm still green at this site. When I tell you they had so many problems that were identified that I had to answer for, even though I had only been their CRA for like a month. And that went up so many chains across so many departments, like you said, like to the point where it even got to my company CEO. I don't even work for a small company. It should have never hit that man. But they're like, oh yeah, the CEO of XYZ, he's aware of this and he's waiting for you to resolve this in 30 days. And you got like, y'all gotta stop.
Yeah.
So it can get intense for real. So we just try to prevent it all at the beginning, so we don't even have to deal with that.
Yeah. And so another thing, and I try to reiterate this. If you've been on any of my previous lives, I always make a point of saying clinical research, biotech, pharma are not one of those, especially if you are trying to be involved with something in any regard related to the trial, like the clinical trials process. it's not just one of those jobs that you can get into expecting a check and not being in it because you enjoy doing it or because you are good at your job. But at the minimum, you should be good at your job. Like, I'm not saying you have to love it. Like, I'm not saying you have to love it, but at the minimum, you need to be good at your job. And so if you're someone who struggles with, prioritizing tasks, like in your current role, like maybe you are saying, okay, yeah, I want a career change and I want to do something different, but yeah, I saw this girl on TikTok talk about like being a CRA and she be traveling all the time. Like she got to go to Italy last week. Like, you watching the glitz and the glam and these dinners and all this kind of stuff and thinking like, oh yeah, like, and she makes 90K, like, and I make 45K right now. Like I'm gonna go and become a CRA and I'm gonna make 90K. Like, and you're not already good at your job, or you're not already someone who has a strong attention to detail or cannot manage multiple things at the same time, is, doesn't really have a grasp of project management or time management at the absolute least. Sometimes taking some time to kind of evaluate those things and maybe taking a baby step, or going into clinical research in a more supportive capacity so that you can get that mentorship and guidance, to build that foundation for yourself. Because again, doing this GCP course is going to give you that foundation and exposures to, to the language, to the keywords that they're looking for in these job descriptions, and going to help give you the right mindset with going into the role. But it's still not going to provide that on the job training, that a lot of companies are looking for you to have when you're coming into these positions. So the best thing that you can do is be honest with yourself about evaluating where you are currently. Do you need additional mentorship? Are you someone who, if someone shows you how to do something and you can be trained on it, and have the support that you need, then you can thrive after that? Or are you someone who, sometimes it takes you a little bit of time to like get good at your job. Like it might take a little ramp up period. So those are things to take into consideration. And as I'll go through these different lectures that I'm giving on TikTok, I'll talk about some of the differences between biotech, between going to a CRO, between going to a pharma company, and the differences in the type of experience that you can have working for each one of these companies. Because there are CROs that are bigger where they do offer more support, but there are also CROs where they have so many studies that when you get hired, the expectation is that you're going to be able to be a go-getter, a can-doer, and roll up your sleeves and just figure it out and ask the right questions to the right people as you're going along. There's also biotech companies that are the same way. So it's important that when you start to get those interviews and have those questions, that you don't end the interview and say, nope, I don't have any questions. That you are, if you're someone that needs that support, you want to be asking those questions and, saying, okay, what type of mentorship is offered, within the scope of the team? How is feedback handled on the team? Can you give me an instance of a piece of feedback that someone has brought up and how it's been addressed for the team? So looking to just kind of ask the right questions to see if this is going to be an environment where you can truly thrive in. Because I've seen people where maybe they were good at their jobs and maybe they did come in and they just needed some support, but because they didn't get it, they ended up leaving clinical research and said, oh, I absolutely hated it because of a bad experience that could have been avoided had they taken the time to assess where they were and what they actually needed in a role. So when you're thinking about those interviews and the conversations and stuff that you have, think about the fact that, oh, somebody said Beyonce just won Best Country Album at the Grammys.
Girl, what?
Wait a minute.
I'm down here on live. My daughter upstairs watching the Grammy.
I'm up here with y'all. I'm not even watching the Grammys. Wait a minute. I know that's right. I know that's right. I know that's right.
Need them tour tickets to drop.
That's my girl. I know that's right. I know that's right. Okay, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
The Cowboy Carter Tour 2025 in there.
Just know I'm gonna be out there at the Cowboy Carter tour. People talking about, well, I didn't really like Cowboy Carter. Well, that's fine. I shouldn't be there then, because I'm gonna be there, and it better be a ticket for me. Whew.
That you done got hot. My God, did you win the Grammy? What?
No, Cowboy Carter has been on repeat for me.
It's such a good album.
This it drop. I play that. I play that album every morning. I swear, I play it every day. I know that's right. That's my girl. Okay. Anyways, back to business. I had to look it up to make sure it was true. Somebody texted to me, and I'm like, don't play.
On Google, like
I can't even take what people say at face value. Like I literally have to. When somebody says something, it's to the point now where before I even respond back, I have to go and look it up for myself to make sure what they're saying is actually true. Because stuff just be so random now. Beyonce becomes the first Black woman to win a country Grammy in 50 years. A
wow.
moment of silence for Black women, please. Okay. I don't even know what we were talking about, but anyways.
Do it matter? No, just
If somebody remembers what I was saying, let me know in the comments. Um,
girl,
wow. Mm,
you threw the whole chat off.
sure did. Okay, but yeah. Anyways, so those were the two things that we were gonna go over this evening. We'll be up here till 9:30. There was one other thing I was gonna. Oh yeah, the other thing I was gonna say. Oh, Tiffany was locked in because she remembers where the conversation was. Thank you, Tiffany. Questions to ask the interview about support. Okay, so yeah, so actually, thank you for that. So getting back to what I was saying about the interview piece, yeah, like at the end of the interview, just making sure that you have questions going into going into the interview, but also leave space to have questions and like for the conversation to evolve. Sometimes you may go off course and you may talk about something that is of interest to you, and you can use that as an opportunity to say, okay, well, actually, yeah, that's a great point that you mentioned this. I'm actually looking to learn more about this as well. Like, even though this is, you guys have oncology studies going on, I also saw that you are, there are opportunities for being involved in gene therapy studies. That's something I want to learn about. Is there opportunity for me to get experience with gene therapy, even though I will be supporting the oncology portfolio? So kind of thinking about it as a two-way street. I think that is actually what I was kind of going into next was a lot of people go into an interview and they're just like, oh, I'm just so nervous because it's an interview and they're going to ask me all these questions. An interview is just as much something for a conversation for you as it is for them. Like, they shouldn't be the only ones leaving being able to check off all their boxes. Like, you should also have your own list of things that you're looking for in a company, and you should be checking off your boxes as well. Like, based on some of the responses that they give you, like if you ask about support and mentorship and they're like, yeah, well, I mean, this is kind of like, we're looking for people who are motivated and can do it on their own. Like, that might be a red flag to say, oh, okay, no, it sounds I'm gonna take them for face value. Like, they are saying everybody needs to figure it out on their own, and yeah, this doesn't sound like somewhere I want to work. So don't be afraid to turn companies down or like check companies off your list, based on your priorities and the things that are important to you. But all of that is going to come from just knowing yourself and being realistic about what to expect when you're going through the interview process. Whether that is what type of roles you're targeting, whether that is what type of salary you should be targeting, whether that is understanding the different therapeutic areas and choosing one based off of the background that you have. Like, I see a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, like I'm interested in a CRA role, and I'll like tell them to send me some examples of roles that they've been applying to, and they'll send me stuff that's like for CRA2, and it's all like oncology stuff, and literally in the experience it'll say requires 2 years of CRA oncology experience, and I'm just like, okay, well, no wonder you're not getting any calls back because you were working as a phlebotomist before this. So that might not be the best entry point. Yes, you do have transferable skills, but if they're saying you need oncology experience in phase 2 and phase 3 studies, and they want 2 years of that, plus they also want you to have oncology experience and you haven't worked with oncology patients, it might be kind of like one of those things where you need to evaluate, okay, am I just aimlessly kind of like applying to any CRA position I see, or am I being strategic about the types of positions I'm applying to? And is CRA the best entry point for me to go into right now based on where I am in my current career and my skill set and the knowledge that I have about the field and the industry itself? Anything to add, Sean?
Um, oh, before we had got to the specific interview part, it was being honest about the skills needed. Like if you can be organized, if you can pay attention to detail, those things. You need to come in with those things already. Because there's critical research biotech. I'm gonna pay well, but you will work for every penny that you get. Um, so you just have to be realistic. If you're not somebody that can stay on task currently, then whatever that you have, critical research will be an added challenge because you're also learning something new as far as your protocol, the therapeutic area you're with, the study team, each of your individual sites, not just CRAs have sites. Um, I think everybody has sites in clinical research anyway. Um, so you will have a lot of competing priorities that you just got to get them done. So definitely being organized is something.
Yeah, that's a good point. She said, I don't think I saw one, but do you have an interview guide with common questions or is each job different? I was
Um,
like, yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I was gonna say, I have one for CRAs, um, but each role will be different.
Mm-hmm.
Because a data management role isn't gonna ask the same questions as a CRA role, nor is a CPA role a budget analyst. You know, it's gonna be different. So these are depend on your interest, as well as your career level. Because the CRA role, like you said, isn't entry level. You can find some training programs, but in those training programs, they're not expecting you to have really any CRA foundational knowledge. So it wouldn't really be helpful.
Yeah. So, and I think to Shai's point, yeah, I think there are some like reference points for each like kind of functional area that there are like interview guides with like some common questions that you could ask depending on the functional area you're interviewing for. But when I like honestly, from my experience of like 5 years in regulatory, I've never been asked the same set of questions in any interview, honestly. Like some interviews have been just like basic stuff and it's like just more broad questions where they're just saying like, okay, tell me about a time when you had to work on a team and it was like a challenging time crunch or something and what you had to do. um I will say like over the in my last role there was for regulatory, they had like a thought exercise activity. So the interviews were all regular. Like I had my first round or my first screening call, which was like with the HR person or talent acquisition person. Then I had a first round interview, which was with like the hiring manager for the role. Then I had a second round interview, which was like, I guess it was a series of second round interviews where I interviewed with two or three different people on different teams. So I met with somebody on Plan Ops. I met with somebody on um, uh, clinical develop, like yeah, Plan Ops, Plan Dev. I met with somebody who was on somebody else who was on the regulatory team, and then I met with the head of PV, all part of like my round two interview. And so then after that, they sent me a thought exercise where they were like, okay, this is basically just like a kind of similar to the scenario I gave you guys earlier, and you answered, what your thought process would be. It was something like that, but regulatory. And it was like, if you were the head of regulatory for this position, what would you do? And obviously, I wasn't even interviewing for the head of regulatory position. It was just like an exercise to say, if you were interviewing to be like the head of regulatory, how would you come up with a strategy for this type of program if we're looking to get the product approved in this timeline? And what teams would you integrate into your, strategic plan? How often would you meet with them? They asked me about project management, about, making sure that people stayed on track with all the different things that they're doing. And I had to summarize all of that and like provide a response within like a couple of days. And then after that, I was extended a offer. And that was the first time I'd ever done something like that. But I'm hearing that a lot of companies are kind of moving to that, especially like biotech, not necessarily like big pharma, because I think they usually have kind of like a standard type of questions that they ask. But yeah, I say I've been asked different questions in all interviews. Usually, it kind of the ones that I'm usually always asked are like situational questions about time management, prioritization, asking me about dealing with challenges with people on teams and differences on opinions and things like that. So
I've always
basically,
had those too.
mm-hmm. I think the best people always ask me about like the best approach for preparing for interviews. I would say the STAR method. One thing before I really got comfortable with interviewing and was trying to prepare is just kind of writing out the STAR method. Like for me, I would actually type out my answers first, like use a Google Doc and go through and take different scenarios and write them out using the STAR method. And then I would basically just kind of record myself doing those answers. I would just kind of use it as an outline. So it's not like I'm reading verbatim exactly what every single bullet point says based on what I've written, but I'm kind of like summarizing it and trying to come up with the right flow of how I'm going to say it in the interview when I'm asked. The other thing that I'll say is like when it comes to interviewing, a lot of people feel like, okay, well, they might ask me these questions. Like they might ask me about a time where I had, strengths and weaknesses. They might ask me about a time that was difficult, how I am able to prioritize, how I'm able to show leadership on the team. You may get asked all those questions, but the best way to kind of go about it is find 3 to 5 different scenarios where you did multiple of those things within the context of one situation. So you may have been proactive and shown leadership and thought about a way to solve a problem in an innovative way, all in one situation. The biggest thing is going to be actually digging deep to think about those times when you've done those things. Because what people have a tendency to do is like on their resumes, not talk about those important things that they're, going to want to hear about in the interview, but more so people will say like, responsible for this, help with this, assisted with this. Whereas the more important things to communicate would be the value add in those roles. So think about the most important things that you've done that have like changed the trajectory of the team, or like maybe a process was established or enhanced because of something that you did. I always talk about like whenever I was like pivoting from pharmacy to clinical research or like to the regulatory space as a pharmacist. Having experience in hospital and in retail, like a lot of people will just like put stuff that's not important to the role. And I'm like, you have like that is very important to be able to dissect the things that are important from your job description to make people see that they're relevant. Because a lot of people who have maybe not worked with PharmDs in the clinical research or biotech space will just kind of like look at pharmacists and be like, oh, you're a pharmacist. Well, why are you applying to this role? Don't you, because the connotation is like pharmacists working in retail, just count pills, put them in a bottle, and like dispense them to patients. When we do a lot more than that. Regulatory, in my mind, is very similar to being a pharmacist because we are the final check. So when we're checking for drug-drug interactions, a lot of times when we're verifying those orders, we are the last check after the technician has pulled the drug off the shelf, after they have filled the prescription. Before it is dispensed, we're checking all the things to make sure that this is the right dose, that it's going to the right patient, that this is the right medication in the bottle, because we don't want, to check it and it actually not be the right medication that's in the bottle. And then patients calling us saying, hey, this is somebody else that has somebody else's name on it. So we're checking all those things to make sure that everything is done correctly. And in regulatory, we're kind of the same thing. Like after the site level, team has collected all the documentation, after they have filled out all the forms and gotten all the regulatory documentation, it is submitted to the sponsor, right? It's submitted into the trial master file. And so a lot of times if information is requested and it's going to the health authority, like FDA, for example, we are the people who are giving them that or handing over that information. So we're the last ones having eyes on that documentation before it goes out. And that is kind of the same thing as like what a pharmacist is doing. But if on my resume, all I'm saying is administered 15 COVID vaccines in one day, nobody's going to see that translated value of what I'm doing as a pharmacist and how that is relevant to working in the clinical research space. So it's important to be able to dissect that information and put only the most relevant things on your resume. Because for a lot of people, they'll be like, well, I've been applying to clinical research roles or biotech roles for months and I haven't heard anything back. And then the first thing that I notice when I look at those resumes is that they probably are not speaking the right language on their resume. They're not capturing the right value. They're not talking about the things that someone who is hiring for that position would care about. And so you have to be able to do that first. And that's why we're starting from square one, kind of going through these lives. I'm doing the videos, kind of breaking down all of the things so that you have a full understanding of the process, that you are fully capable of updating your resume and making sure that it's tailored, that you know the right interview questions to ask and the right things that you should be looking for job descriptions to make sure that you're applying to things that are going to be relevant and that you actually have a chance at hearing back from and securing the role with. Anything to add, Sean?
No, that was perfect.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so it's 9:20. We're going to be up here for probably about 10 more minutes. So if anyone else has like any specific questions, feel free to ask right now. What I will say, I do have a couple of announcements, and I probably will not make a video about this, but anybody that's downloaded the syllabus, I have email addresses, so I will send an email with this update as well. Um, so you guys know this is our very first office hours live on Sunday. I'll do these on Sundays at 8 p.m. Except for next Sunday, since it is the Super Bowl. I forgot that I do have plans, and so does Shy. So we will not be on live next Sunday. Instead, I'll be moving the live up to this coming Friday, the 7th, at the same time, so 8 p.m. I'll also pre-schedule the live, so you can RSVP or like register for it on my page, so I can kind of have a head count of how many people are interested. But yeah, so this upcoming week, instead of doing the next live on Sunday, it's going to be on Friday at 8 p.m. And then after that, we'll resume Sundays. If anything like shifts, then I'll always send an email and communicate it to anybody that is subscribed. But anybody that has has downloaded the syllabus, I have your email address and contact information, so I can just communicate any updates that way. I will say our next topic that's going to be covered within the course is going to be, it's basically going to be breaking down, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's going to be on clinical research, biotech, and pharma. So it's basically be going into detail about the differences and similarities between all of them, and what types of roles you can find in each. So basically just kind of a high level overview of industry breakdown. So the differences between pharma and biotech, which obviously pharma is typically larger companies, and I kind of gave a prelude to that in my last video. Biotech are smaller companies. Sometimes they can be large biotech companies, but typically you see them as smaller companies. And they're usually more innovative therapies. And then clinical research is kind of like the bridge between science and medicine. And so this is the area or the realm where drugs are being tested. So a lot of the positions that you see in the clinical research space surround study activities as it relates to clinical trials. Although you do have like a lot of supportive roles at CROs, like you'll have MSLs, you have like other things, some like, external facing roles. So not necessarily always. Just understand that there are like nuances to each one of these things, which this is meant to be very high level. So there are nuances and detailed things that I may not get into, but if you guys have like questions about it, or maybe you're like, oh, like you said this in this video, but like, is there a situation where it can be different from this? I can answer those questions here on the lab. One of the things that I asked in the video that I posted earlier this week was about, it's just basically asking like if you guys know any biotech, pharma, and clinical research organizations. So if you have not already watched my last video, or if you've taken some time to kind of look into different companies and the differences and stuff already, then drop a comment and let me know if you know of the names of any pharma, biotech, or clinical research organizations or contract research organizations. I think that's also a really good exercise if you aren't familiar with any specific companies. That can kind of get you started with knowing what companies to look into for roles. And I would say like over the next week, between now and Friday, if you plan to join the live on Friday, take some time to look up different biotech, pharma, and clinical research companies. Look at the careers page and look at some of the job descriptions on there to get an idea of, okay, do any of these sound interesting? What you'll notice is like the larger pharmaceutical companies like the Merck and Johnson & Johnson and things like that, they will have a lot of different breakdowns of departments. And so it's really nicely organized on their website. They're a great place to start when you're trying to figure out what all exists and what all types of roles are out there. Biotech companies, especially the smaller ones, they operate very lean, and they tend to only have the necessity, like the roles that are needed the absolute most in terms of needing to get the study started. So you'll always see clinical operations, you'll always see data management, you'll typically see some internal clinical research positions, whether that is an internal CTA or CRA. And yeah, that's all I'll say on that. I think it depends on the company. Like some biotechs are a little bit more lenient on the level of experience that they look for with like CRAs and CTAs versus like CROs and pharma companies. But the thing with pharma companies is it can be kind of hit or miss, especially if you're looking for a clinical research position. Because once they have internal people, those people hold on for those jobs like for dear life. Like you don't see a lot of people at big pharma that are like a CTA or clinical research associate just giving up a job, like trying to job hop and go somewhere else. Like they hold on to them jobs because they good paying, they got good benefits.
Once I get into a pharma company, I ain't letting up.
They got the good benefits. They got the real good pay. They be paying for extra degrees and stuff. Um, I mean, they have all types of like, programs and stuff for professional development. I mean, they're going to have the Black employee resource groups and all these different things. They usually care a little bit more about work-life balance.
You guys are familiar with how Amazon works? Think of a CRO like Amazon. It's like a factory. Uh,
Not you, a factory worker.
a factory worker, okay? They're gonna work the he double hockey sticks out of you. A CRO will. Like you really might not have work life balance. I'm gonna be completely transparent. And you can. It just really depends on your study team, your manager, and the study protocol. They
Mm-hmm.
all three have to align for you to truly have work life balance at a CRO.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
as typically the pharma companies are paying the CROs, they don't have those large departments.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing a lot of the work, and they're paying to do a lot of the work, but you gonna work. And you get. I have friends in pharma, and the life they live is like easy. It ain't easy street, y'all, because you still work. It's easy street compared to the life I'm living. Let me just, because yeah, I'm over here in a sweatshop, but you got to get your experience where you can. But
Yeah,
a lot of people, their goal is to get their experience. You pay your dues. Everybody has to pay dues.
I was
You
just
pay,
about to say that. You got like you have, especially if you're someone who's pivoting. Like now, it's one thing if you come in and you have a degree in clinical research, which the other thing is like a lot. You're starting to see more people with degrees specifically in clinical research and biotech and in regulatory affairs. But 20 years ago, those degrees did not exist. They just came about recently. Before that, it was literally, just people who were falling into roles or like, people just getting in it by way of a cousin, an auntie, a friend, like, because they knew somebody who worked in pharma and they got in and were just shown how to do it. And, because they knew that their degree was in like English or something totally unrelated, they knew they were not going to be able to have that level of pay outside of this industry. And because of that, they clung to it and hung on to that job forever. But now you're starting to see a lot of degree programs kind of spring up, specifically kind of going over curriculums like these, like kind of doing what we're doing right now and kind of walking you through, okay, this is what you can expect. This is what happens. Like this is phase one, phase two, phase three. Before that, like before 5 years ago, a lot of these programs did not exist. And it was just people who had life science degrees coming in, being trained and learning how to do this. And like you would have people who like perform on a really, really top tier level because they were good at project management, because they were good at communication, because they were people that paid attention to detail and they just had good quality healthcare experience. And on top of that, a lot of them were passionate about what they were doing when they see the impact of working in these fields. But yeah, if you're someone who like now, because there are all these different hurdles and there's all these different degree programs and like, you're seeing PhDs and like doctorate degrees and stuff that we didn't see doctorate degrees in before, like you do have to make yourself more marketable. You do have to make yourself stand out. You do have to know more and like be qualified. And then you got all these extra forces working against you, like saying, DEI and all this kind of stuff. Like you have extra hurdles working against you. So you do have to come in, find an entry point and pay your dues. Like you have to get in there, work hard. And I'm not saying like, oh, you got a slave in these jobs, but like you do have to get in there. You have to be someone who's willing to work and willing to learn before you can get to that point where you're up here making TikTok videos saying, yeah, I make $150,000 a year as
a lot of I have been so shocked by the number of people that are literally CTAs up here selling clinical research, guys. No tea, no shade. But I'm just like, girl, you ain't even you okay. Get
here's
your
a day, here's a day in the life of a of a clinical research coordinator that makes $150,000 a year and works from home. I know it sounds tempting, but like, do not let these people trick you into paying for these courses that are not certified and all this kind of things. Like, it's fine, somebody's going to provide you a guide, or somebody's going to provide resources and like be, offer you some type of assistance directly. That's fine, but like, unless you're going to like through what is it, ACRP, unless you're going through them, like none of these certifications and stuff that people are paying for, like these courses that people are offering, are going to be certified at the end of the day. It's just going to be for information purposes only. You can't slap it on your resume and say, oh yeah, like I took Dr. Liss's TikTok course on clinical research and now I'm certified. That's exactly why I presented this as a 101 level course. This is an intro. This is literally just meant to provide exposure, and then after you have these conversations and we're up here on live, you can walk away and have a starting point to say, okay, I was on a live and I heard a CRA, someone who's worked as a CRA for the last 5 years, talk about her experience. She gave interview questions that she's received before. This is not something that she's like looking for anything in exchange for. It's just her saying, this is what has been my experience. I didn't have anybody guiding me or holding my hand when I was doing this. So here's what I can share based on my knowledge. But yeah, don't let these people fool you. Not saying that people don't know what they're talking about, but yeah, it's no need to spend a lot of time.
There are a lot of programs out there now, like I was said more recently. And I've even looked into those programs from friends. I'm not going to drop any names, but clinical research programs, if they cost the same as going back to school and getting a degree, you just go back to school. Like, don't even do the program. Because, like you said, you're going to finish the program. They're going to give you a certificate. But it really doesn't hold much value when schools are now offering that as a degree option or a graduate certificate from an accredited college.
Mm-hmm.
Like the HBCU I went to, North Carolina Central University, they rolled out their clinical research program in 2019. I went and got a graduate certificate in clinical research from that school. It was a 1-year program. That's the program I did. If you're going to do any program, do one that you can actually put on your resume and hold some weight.
Yep. And I highly recommend, I mean, I ain't even go to Central, but I highly recommend their program. Like, I have talked to so many, like, I've come across so many people where I'm like asking them how they got in, and they literally said, oh, yeah, like I did the graduate certification, or oh, I got my master's in pharmaceutical sciences from Central. Like, it is a very well connected program, and like they offer a lot of resources for you to be connected to people who work in the industry. And so
they don't play.
Don't sleep on those networking opportunities.
Industry. Part of the reason I even went to Central was because they were the only HBCU in North Carolina that offered pharmaceutical science as a degree. I think other colleges that even offered it at the time that I started college in 2012 was Campbell, and I was all the way to Campbell. So yeah, it's a great program, great school, great resources. Top notch. They'll have companies actually come in, whether you're doing the pharmaceutical program, the clinical research program, the graduate certificate in clinical research, they have a ton of resources. Like, they are super connected. So they really hold their weight in the heart of RTP for real. So
let me scroll back up because there was a question from T that I realized I didn't answer. Is it best to look at companies locally or just look at them in general? I feel like if you're someone who's flexible and is not tied to a certain demographic area, region, I would say look for stuff all over the place. If you can move, if you're willing to like relocate. What a lot of people, think is like in other industries, I don't know how things work with like, other industries, like with healthcare and things like that. If you get a job as a nurse somewhere else, like they may not pay for relocation. Typically for like a CRO, a biotech company, pharma, if you're applying for a job and they, hire you knowing that you live in another state, they're going to offer some type of relocation assistance. Now, maybe not for like the absolute entry level positions. They may not do that. It just may kind of be on the strength of you like moving somewhere. But if you're coming in, you have like a master's degree, for example, and you have a lot of like skills that you can leverage, and you're coming into like maybe a mid-level role or like a clinical research coordinator, 2 role, now if you apply into a position as like a role like at an academic health center, teaching hospital or something like that, the hospitals, they're not going to pay for relocation. But what I will tell you is if it's a biotech company, if it's a CRO, if it's a pharma company, they sometimes will pay for relocation to kind of help you facilitate that move if you do have to move from one state to another. So if you're open to it, I would look for stuff all over the place. I will say, honestly, it makes it easier if you're looking for roles in hubs where there are pharma and biotech presence. It helps significantly. So if you're someone who is in, Biloxi, Mississippi, or like, somewhere in
Don't
Alabama.
say that. How you know my man was from Mississippi? Don't do him.
I didn't even know he was from Mississippi. No, but seriously, like if you're someone from like a small town, like in Mississippi or Alabama or something like that, you may have to be flexible with like how you're looking, and also it may take your journey may be a little bit longer to try to find something that is going to be remote or something that's going to be hybrid. So I would say to that, if you have like find areas that you're willing to compromise, or that you're, and not saying compromise of like you got to take less or have anything lesser than, but you may have to be a little bit strategic with how you get into the industry, because sometimes in those smaller cities, they may not have a huge pharma presence, but they may have a manufacturing site. So you could think about quality as being one of those roles that you go into, or, kind of going into and working in a laboratory type of position, like where you're working in a sterile lab, for example. Especially if you're not someone who is like, tied to a specific role. I would say I've seen people go in and start in the quality space, like quality control or quality assurance. And then when an opportunity internally opens up, they can move over into the regulatory space. Or when an opportunity moves open, they can move over into project management. And because they're already an employee of the company, they can be working on a project management certification that the company is paying for. So think about, you don't have to take the cookie cutter approach. You may have to do something that works for you based on where you live, based on what opportunities are available in your area. Because I think I mentioned this on the last live. There are a lot of companies that are starting to transition back to hybrid or wanting you to be on site. Now, CRAs are one of those roles where, because you're doing so much and you're responsible for different sites, you are traveling. And so it is, a home base or like a remote type of role.
You're still on site, so it's still in person. It's just when you're not in person, you can work at home.
But for some companies, they may want you to be hybrid. So that may require either a move or, for you to, be somewhere that is close to a hub. So if you're someone who's like pretty close to North Carolina, or like has considered moving to, I know a lot of people say like, oh, like I want to move to Charlotte. If you're interested in clinical research or biotech, I would say like the Raleigh, Durham area is going to be a better bet than Charlotte. Dang, okay.
I
hate that I just said that. I hate that I just said that. Because they're calling
opportunities, but it's going to be a little bit harder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Chrissy.
She was not calling you out.
I was not calling you out. I literally said that, like, and then you left that comment. So, and it wasn't even anything bad. It was just
another little tidbit just to throw that out there. Also, if it's not a lot of clinical research companies, if it's someone that has a lot of medical complexes, a lot of hospitals, a lot of research hospitals, that is a way that a lot of people that I know have gotten into clinical research as well, because they will take a lot of entry level people.
That was going to be my next point. Is like, and there's literally so many ways to go about it. Like I talk to people all the like I have this like weird thing where I like just ask people like anytime I meet somebody new and they're like in the industry, I'm like, how did you get in? How did you land your first role? And so I've heard of people getting in so many different ways that it's like you wouldn't even think to do some of these things. So yeah, like for one, of course, going on LinkedIn, filtering and finding positions that are at like the companies, like the large companies. For two is going to be I would say going to the large pharma companies' websites and then going to their careers page, because even if you're not qualified for some of those roles on the page, it's going to give you a breakdown and it's going to give you a better look, like a bird's eye view of what all is available. Because at some smaller companies, you may not have some of those more like specific roles, but at least you can have something that, say, ultimately, I want to acquire this skill set and come and work for Johnson & Johnson in this capacity. So I'm going to figure out what I need to do to get those skill sets for me to get in that role and do that.
I'll be doing it. Like, okay.
The next thing is if you're somewhere that doesn't have a hub for biotech, pharma, clinical research, any of those things, being open, being flexible and willing to relocate to somewhere that is a hub. If you're not flexible, maybe you have a family, maybe you literally just bought a house and you are not open to moving at this time, looking at manufacturing, seeing if there are manufacturing sites in your area and kind of seeing if there are any roles that, you know, you could benefit from and you could probably move around laterally and gain some type of skill set that's going to be beneficial to you. The next thing is going to be like what Shai said. Every city, most cities, I can't even say most cities because Zebulon ain't got no hospital.
Well, right. So no.
But yeah, like if you're from like a smaller area, or you live 30 minutes outside the city, you may still have to look for like the larger health system in your area. Like what is the major hospital in your community? More than likely, they are participating in some type of clinical trials, like on behalf of some type of sponsor. So a lot of people are surprised. Like I have a lot of client consultations where they're like, "Where should I look for jobs?" And they're like, "I'm based in like Georgia, in like a suburb area in Georgia." And they're like, yeah, like Georgia isn't like a hub for clinical research. We do have some pharma companies, but I don't know where to look. We'll go on Mayo Clinic's website. We'll go on, Piedmont and some of these like hospitals in the area. Grady, like we'll go and look on Grady's website. And you'll be surprised. Like all you do is go in the career section or go under the job section and search clinical research or search. You can't go in there and search pharma or biotech. Clinical research is all it's be the only thing you find, but you can search clinical research or clinical trials, and a whole bunch of roles will pop up. You'll see regulatory specialists, you'll see site activation specialists, you'll see clinical trial project manager, you'll see clinical research coordinator. You'll even see like more entry level positions like clinical research assistant or clinical trial assistant. So that's going to be like the entry level positions. And you'll notice that like when you look at the education and requirements, it's usually just like a high school diploma for some of those positions. So that is like the perfect entry point if you're somebody who maybe doesn't even have a degree or like is working on your bachelor's degree. That's like a great point to kind of come into. And obviously, the next step, getting promoted from clinical research assistant, is going to be usually like a clinical research coordinator or a clinical research associate. So that's going to have that trajectory kind of built in there for you. But you can also be one of those people that comes in, starts as an assistant, gets promoted to a coordinator, and you're at the company for a year or for a year and 6 months, and then after that you say, oh, I'm about to start applying to jobs at a CRO because I want to move over here and make more money or work on different types of studies. And that's how it is, relatively easy, once you get that first role, to within 2 to 3 years to move from one capacity to the next, to have that 30, 40, $50,000 salary increase, and move into that space where you have the life that you want, where you have that balance, where you have, where you're not living paycheck to paycheck, and you just have that like financial flexibility. So it doesn't all come overnight. It doesn't happen immediately, but it can happen in a relatively short amount of time.
So, like, I know for people that are in like the Raleigh Durham area, I know a lot of people personally that have gotten hired at Duke with no experience. You will start as an entry level role. You will more than likely have to go, in person. But like one of my colleagues that I graduated the graduate certificate program with, she started at Duke, stayed there for 2 years, and we reconnected on my first day at my current role. We were in the same orientation because she had been recruited over to where I am as a CRA. So that was her jump, but she only did that role at Duke and was able to leverage that into another role. So, like, again, you got to pay your dues somewhere, somehow. So,
Yeah.
Chrissy, so I know you're in Charlotte and you say you are, and they do have a lot of research nurses. And also, you guys can look at the sites because the sites do need a lot of help. There is a lot of turnover because people do leave for other opportunities as their career begins to climb. So, research nurses are wonderful. And again, you can leverage that into at some point later going to either biotech, clinical research, CRO, or pharma companies. Nurses are, they love nurses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing. Like some people have no interest in being a CRA or a clinical research coordinator. Like I see a lot of people who they want to get out of like regular bedside nursing, but then they go into clinical research as like a research nurse and they love it. And then they stay there and they're happy with the pay, they're happy with the work life balance, and they enjoy what they do. So there are so many different nuances and different niches to roles that you can find. So yeah, I would definitely say if you're in an area where you know that there's a huge medical center or there's a huge like hospital presence or like one of those hospitals that's like really renowned, I don't be surprised if you go in their career section and you see that there are opportunities there, and you'll be like surprised that like, wow, how didn't I think of this before? So that can be like a great place to look. Okay, so this question from Grace, this is gonna be the last one we answer before we hop off of here. But of course, if you guys have any questions, um, definitely make sure to join the live on Friday. Like I said, this next live that we have is gonna be on Friday at 8 p.m. instead of Sunday because the Super Bowl is Sunday, and then we'll resume Sundays at 8 p.m. Next week. What about job security? How long will a trial last? What happens after the trial is over? So this is pretty much like kind of one of those things of like why CROs exist in a sense, and why you don't see as many full-time roles for clinical research positions at the sponsor level. So a few minutes ago, I was kind of talking about how when there are internal CRA and clinical research coordinator and trial supportive roles, people will get those jobs and they will literally hold on to them until they retire. Like they will not leave those roles by any means because they usually operate pretty lean with internal positions. Because studies can be anywhere from 6 months to 1 year to 2 years or 3 years. So you can imagine that, okay, if a study's going on for a couple of years, they may not have a need for a full-time employee after that study is over if they are planning on, maybe doing another study in a different therapeutic area. So CROs kind of fill that purpose. So when you think about like travel nurses, for example, like they are not working for a specific hospital. They are employed by this travel agency who like is the one that cuts their checks and things like that. But they staff these different hospitals like based on the need that they have at those institutions for a contract period of a certain amount of time. So you can kind of think of a CRO as being that same thing where you like the CRO will be the one who cuts their checks and the one that they are employed by, but you will be supporting a study on behalf of a pharmaceutical or a biotech company that could be like Johnson and Johnson or Merck or AbbVie, for example. And so depending on the therapeutic area, they will have, all these different CRAs, all these different clinical research coordinators and study startup team who have experience in that area. And they'll say, okay, we need people that are involved or have dermatology experience to work on this dermatology study. And so they will assign all those, study teams that the company requests to that study, and they will, work on that study for whatever the amount of time is. And then they'll be assigned to another study. Shah, you can go a little bit more.
And I had to chuckle a little bit because those trials be lasting a long time. And even if you think the trial may only last 18 months, that's going to depend on funding from the sponsor. That's going to depend on patient recruitment. That's going to depend on site availability. Things happen all the time. So the last study I was on, it was only supposed to be 18 months. We're on year 4. So, and then you have to, we're on year 4 and just now starting to wrap up, starting to begin closeout activities. But as soon as you start, if you're at a CRO, that's all I can speak for. As soon as that study starts winding down, they put you on something else. They have more work than they have people.
Mm-hmm.
So I say you absolutely will work. There will not be a shortage of work, which is one thing I do love is job security. I have that. It's just always a study going on. And typically as a CRA, even as a CTA, a lot of times you will be on 2 to 3 studies at one time. So you don't necessarily be on one project. Sometimes you can, depending on how big that project is and what the bandwidth is for your position. But a lot of times you will be spread across a couple of different trials. So the job security is there.
Yeah. And I can speak to that from I'm someone who has always worked on the sponsor side or worked for the actual like pharmaceutical or biotech companies. Yeah, I agree with what Shah said about. So I feel like biotech companies tend to be, especially the smaller ones, are the CRO version of like that drug development space, like the sponsor side. So pharma is like, pharma is kind of like the luxury, like high end retailer, and then like I would say like biotech is kind of like the department store, like your local shopping plaza, for example. Like you go there and it's just kind of like a free for all. But then you go in like, the mall, like to the retail designer, and they got security and stuff before you walk into the Dior store and that kind of thing. I would describe that as like how pharma is, because like with all the biotech companies I've worked for, I've always been, even as a regulatory person, I've been assigned to multiple studies. Like I've usually had anywhere from like 2 to 3 studies that I'm responsible for at any given time. The only time I did not have 2 to 3 studies I was working on was when I worked for a pharma company. I had one program that I was over, and literally I was just responsible for that program. I had so much free time. I don't know why I left that job. I felt like I shouldn't be as bored as I was because there was not much to do. Like when I was at the pharma company, I was only responsible for one study. I had like literally 2 meetings that I had to attend each week. It was like probably 2 hours of my time I was in meetings for the week, and then I had like one team meeting. And I'm talking about the rest of the week, like there might be 1 or 2 things for me to do, and that's it. But like biotech, they keep you busy. It's always something for you to do, even when there's not supposed to be something for you to do. Like there's gonna be something for you to do, or something that you can be working on, or something that's coming down the pipeline that they want you to start thinking about and getting ideas together for. Um, but yeah, I mean, I feel like that all kind of helps with career advancement early on, especially if you're someone who's new to the space. It's gonna give you that it's going to give you that cross functional experience that's going to be able to be leveraged as you move up in your career. And then once you get to that point where you're like, okay, I have a very flexible and very broad skill set. I know a little bit about everything. I've worked in a few different capacities. You can make that decision of like when the timing is right for you to be like, okay, I've made it up to this level. I actually thought I wanted to be a biotech baddie. Like I thought I wanted to like, try to make it the senior VP level, but I'm cool here. Like I'm cool making my $250,000 a year, and I don't want to manage anybody. I only want to be an individual contributor. You can make that determination for yourself and like, just say, okay, yeah, I think I'll stay here until I retire or until I don't want to do this anymore. But yeah, um, we definitely have gone over. We've been up here almost 2 hours now, but I thank you guys for hanging on. It seems like we have like had the same participants for the last hour or so. Like the number's been around the same. I feel like we had a really good discussion. I appreciate you guys for being interactive and responding to the questions earlier. I hope you felt like it was valuable and that you were able to get something out of it. If you haven't done the GCP certification already, I'm going to continue to reiterate this over and over week after week because I know there's always new people that are popping into the lives. It's the GCP certification can be added to your resume. It is not something that costs any money. It is completely free to complete it. The link I thought I had it linked in the syllabus, but I actually accidentally linked the wrong website. So the website is not going to take you to anything. But if you are, I did send out an email with the correct link. But I'm going to just tell y'all now, like the GCP certification, just look up GCP NIDA, Clinical Trials Network. GCP NIDA, National Institute for Drug Abuse, Clinical Trial Network. If you Google that, it's going to be the very first link that comes up. You just make an account, complete the course at your leisure. My goal was for you guys to try to have it completed by this Friday, the 7th, because that's going to be when our next live is going to be. And we can kind of go over it a little bit more and answer any questions that people may have, things that may not have been clear on that. And also the videos I'll be posting this week are going to be kind of related. And going forward will be related to GCP and like having some knowledge and understanding of that. But if you are busy, I understand that people have full-time jobs and stuff, and they may not have time to complete it. Just do it at your leisure. Just get started on it. Doing some versus doing none is going to benefit you. So just get through it at your own pace, whatever works for you. Will there be more online discussions in the near future? I'm new here, but would love to hear more. Yes, we'll be here. This is the Sunday live, and this is like my office hours. We'll continue to do Sunday lives. We just will not have one next Sunday for Super Bowl Sunday. Instead, we're going to move it up a couple of days to this coming Friday at 8 p.m. As a matter of fact, if you go and link in my bio and download the course syllabus, download it tonight if you get it by midnight tonight, I'll send out an email first thing tomorrow morning with everything that we discussed on here, like with all the updates and things like that about the change in time, with everything about the GCP course. I'll resend the link out again. So yeah, just make sure you do. If you grab it before midnight, then I will send another email to anybody that has downloaded the course syllabus, so you have any updates related to that. And any changes, anything that veers away from like the dates that I have on the course syllabus, I will continue to send email updates as well. We also have a Discord community. Since today is our very first, or since Friday was the very first video that I posted as part of this series, and today was our very first live from that. We'll start to get the chat a little bit more active. If you're someone who's planning on joining the Discord chat, just make sure you introduce yourself when you join. We will be accepting resumes very soon because Shy and I will be kind of tag teaming to review anyone's resume who wants to be a part of that. That is going to be something exclusive to the Discord community only. I've already had over like 350 people download the course syllabus, so I will not be reviewing resumes for all 350 people that are in that have downloaded the course syllabus. But if you want that individualized support, join the Discord, and we will be reviewing everybody's resume who wants a resume review. That's part of that community. Yeah. So when you're saying that link is not working, if you're talking about the GCP one that's in the syllabus, then it's because the wrong link is in there, and I'm gonna email that out. But if you're talking about the link in my bio, it should be working. There's a few links in my bio. Click on the bio site and then click on the very first link that says career sim. No, the Discord. Can you email me separately, and I can just probably add you manually? Yeah, just send me a direct email. My email is listed in my bio also. It's alyssa@thecareerstem.com or info@thecareerstem.com, either one. Okay, but other than that, thank you guys so much. I feel like I had a really good time up here. Shout out to Beyonce for getting that Grammy for the country album tonight. Really happy to, even though I did not get to witness that history, I will be going and reviewing the footage immediately after this. But yeah, I'm gonna catch y'all on Friday. Let me know if you have any questions in the meantime. And thank you, Shy, for all of the really valuable insight on the CRA perspective.
Thank you guys. You guys did so good tonight. Y'all been studying your DCP cert. We could tell. We could tell.
You've been on there Zoom, yeah, bro. All right, thank y'all. Have a good night.
Bye.